Good afternoon. I want to thank you, President Mason, for that very, very kind introduction, and I want to thank John Jay College for having me here today. I am honored to be with so many of my colleagues in government, and I want to just name some of the folks that are here today. I'm really grateful for their presence. Some of my great colleagues and friends on the City Council. We've been joined by Councilmember Margaret Chin, Councilmember Bob Holden, Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, Councilmember Mark Levine, Councilmember Karen Koslowitz, the chair of our Committee on Criminal Justice, Councilmember Keith Powers, and the chair of our Committee on Public Safety, Councilmember Donovan Richards. I want to thank all of them. Also, I'm so grateful to be joined by two of our fantastic district attorneys in the city of New York. The district attorney from the borough of Brooklyn, Eric Gonzalez, who's here, good friend, and our great DA from the borough of the Bronx, Darcel Clark, is here as well. And last but not least, someone who I just adore and who her inauguration, one of her inaugurations was here at John Jay. She is a former member of the City Council. She is a glass ceiling breaker and a leader for justice in our city, in our state, and across the country. Our amazing Attorney General Letitia James is here. So I'm honored to be joined by all of them. I'm honored to be here at John Jay, one of the best colleges at the City University of New York. Today, we're going to talk about how our criminal justice system should function in the 21st century, and I'm going to propose some concrete steps on how to get there. But to begin this talk about our city's future, I'd like to start by addressing our past. Stop and frisk, broken windows, and mass incarceration. The truth is that because of the color of my skin, I can't truly know the trauma experienced by people who have endured the consequences of these policies. But as Speaker of the New York City Council, it is my job to listen and to understand how policies affect communities. And I've listened to many New Yorkers, and I've been moved by what I've heard. So today I want you to hear just one of these stories from a very good and important friend of mine.
I've been stopped and frisked numerous times in my life, too many times to count. I was 14 years old when I was first stopped and frisked. I was walking from my grandmother's house with my cousin to a childhood friend's home. We were followed by an unmarked vehicle. As we approached Merrick Boulevard, the car swung around the corner and several detectives hopped out of their vehicles. They then proceeded to ask us to put our hands up and asked us, did we have any weapons in our pockets? As I reached down into my pocket, they drew their guns rapidly. That experience never has left me. As a now 37-year-old black man with a 3-year-old son.
Thank you, Donovan. As I said, I have listened and I have learned. And as Speaker of the New York City Council, it's my duty to acknowledge that these policies were wrong. Less than a decade ago, we stopped and frisked almost 700,000 people a year in the city of New York. The overwhelming majority of them were black and brown New Yorkers who had done nothing wrong. Our jail population was over 20,000 people in the 1990s, and most of those people were in for minor crimes and they could not afford bail. And just 8 years ago, we sent more than 500,000 people to criminal court for quality of life offenses. Today, our stop and frisk rate is reportedly down by 98%. Our jail population is almost a third of what it was, and criminal summonses for offenses like drinking in public are down 96% from where they were less than a decade ago. We have made great strides. But the profound injustices of those practices continue to haunt us. Our jail population in New York City right now is 87% Black and Latinx. 87%. 81% of people prosecuted for crimes in New York City are Black and Latinx. 88% of people stopped and frisked are Black and Latinx. This is the true legacy of stop and frisk, broken windows, and mass incarceration. Our system has clearly had a profound and long-lasting impact on communities of color, and I've seen it myself. I recently watched criminal court arraignments in both Manhattan and Brooklyn, and I saw overwhelmingly Black and Latino men charged with crimes of poverty and of addiction. Crimes that should have been addressed with treatment and with services. The policies of stop and frisk, broken windows, and mass incarceration have turned our criminal justice system into a system of injustice for poor people of color. And for what? New York City is the safest big city in the country right now. And we did it while moving away from these practices. Many of you in this room led that fight. And you know that these changes did not come easy. When the City Council passed laws to send quality of life cases to civil court instead of criminal court, it was a direct rebuttal to broken windows. Some people said that the battle days would come back. Murders, muggings, and mayhem, they were all coming back when we did that. It didn't happen. They said the same thing when we said no to the abuse of stop and frisk and yes to neighborhood policing. But the facts really speak for themselves. Crime continued to fall, and now we are at a pivotal moment in our city. We have shown that we can move forward with a holistic approach to justice that can keep crime down and keep all communities safe. Hopefully the beginning of a new era. To start, let's acknowledge that every community, from the Upper West Side to Brownsville, should be able to trust that everyone who wears a badge is there to protect them. And let's acknowledge that many people, particularly in communities of color, currently do not feel that way. To earn some of this trust, we need to repeal 50A, the state law that allows the NYPD to shield police officers from public scrutiny. It's what's kept New Yorkers from knowing the disciplinary records of the officers involved in the death of Eric Garner. There's a trial going on this week, as you all know. Eric Garner died in 2014, and 5 years later, the public still has many unanswered questions. 50A keeps officer misconduct in the shadows. And I want to be clear, I fully respect the women and men of the New York City Police Department who risk their lives every single day to keep us safe. Part of the reason why we are here today, why I can give this speech today on criminal justice reform, is because the NYPD is arresting people at dramatically lower rates than they were just a few years ago. In the past decade, arrests have gone down by 40%. And it was the NYPD who worked with the New York City Council to make sure that over 100,000 criminal cases were redirected to civil court. They were our partners in this, and I want to thank them for that. But those with the power to arrest and to take away another person's liberty should be held to the highest standards of accountability. 50A keeps communities from being able to wholly trust the police, and it must be repealed this legislative session in Albany. That trust will only come from a robust discipline system that is transparent to the public. We also have to rebuild trust in our corrections system, which is why we are closing Rikers Island, a stain on the soul of our city. I am so proud to say that we are making serious progress on this front. Thanks in huge part to former Chief Judge Jonathan Lippman, who is here today. I want to thank you, Jonathan, for your amazing service and leadership to our city and to our state. The land use process for new jail sites has begun, and Albany has finally passed transformative laws on the issues of discovery, speedy trial, and bail reform, but there is so much more to do. Going forward, our default response for most arrests should be diversion, treatment, and rehabilitation, not incarceration. Thanks to bail reform in Albany, we are about to have at least 2,000 fewer people in our city's jails. Let's continue that movement towards decarceration. We need to increase our investment in alternatives to jail and prison. And importantly, we We need to take the money we used to spend on jails and invest those funds into communities directly impacted by mass incarceration. We need to address the fundamental problems that led to justice system involvement in these communities in the first place. We need substance use treatment programs. We need more supportive housing. We need better access to health care. We need more job programs. This is how you fix a system that has been broken for far too long. This is how you invest in fairness. It's something I am completely committed to and will be working with my colleagues here throughout the rest of our term. Here's one fairly easy way we can invest in fairness. Let's stop sending people on parole back to jail for minor technical violations. Right now, people accused of these minor violations account for 8% of our jail population. That's around 600 people right now behind bars for things like missing a curfew, or not passing a drug test, or missing an appointment. The stories we have been hearing are outrageous. Just recently, the Fortune Society, see my good friend David and Stanley there, the Fortune Society told us about a woman who ended up on Rikers Island for missing one appointment with her parole officer. One appointment. I wish that this was an aberration, but it's not. People are incarcerated for technical little things like this every single day. The state is considering the Less is More Act to help fix this problem, and I urge our colleagues, my colleagues in Albany, to pass this legislation this session. But the City Council will also take action. We can and will provide judges who handle these violations with meaningful programs to get people out and to get them out quickly. The first program will identify people arrested for parole violations immediately upon their incarceration and put them on the fast track to release. They'll participate in a 2-week intensive program with a robust array of services, from cognitive behavioral therapy to coursework on understanding parole conditions. They have not committed new crimes, only technical infractions. So 2 weeks is more than enough time to get them back on track and prepared for reentry. The second program will work directly with parole judges to identify individuals they don't think should be sent back to prison. These individuals will participate in a community-based program that will provide important services like transitional housing and drug treatment. These type of programs work. We know they work. With the help of the Fortune Society, the woman who missed a meeting with her parole officer is in support of housing and getting a robust array of services. She has been out of jail for over a year. Her name is Lucinda, and she is here today. I want to thank you, Lucinda, for being here today, for sharing your story with us. The Fortune Society and the Osborne Association are here today as well, along with some of their clients who have been directly impacted by our broken parole system. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank you all for the amazing work you do in our city every single day. Our new programs will help keep people from getting needlessly locked up and help drive down our jail population. They'll help us achieve the city we all want and need. And I am so excited about the work that's ahead of us. I'm going to be honest, there is no easy solution for this next challenge. Nearly 1 in 5 people in our city's jails have been diagnosed with a serious mental illness. Most come from poor communities of color that have limited access to medical care and are also subject to higher levels of law enforcement. The healthcare system has turned away the chronically ill and left jails as the public caretaker of last resort. But incarcerating people with mental health issues is a profound injustice and something that we should never allow in our city. Because I am serious about addressing the mass incarceration of those with mental illness, I'm prepared to address one of the key drivers in this crisis: housing. Finding a place to house and care for the mentally ill Mentally ill people who are charged with crimes will not be easy, and it will not be cheap. But we can't ignore this problem because it's hard. We need transitional housing for those who just need a temporary home, and supportive housing for people who need more supervision. And here's the thing, we're ignoring solutions to this problem, but we are still paying for it. We spend $2.4 billion. That is billion with a B. Every year incarcerating people in our city's jails. $2.4 billion. That's over $300,000 a year for a single individual. If the moral issue doesn't move you, then the money issue should. Today, I'm announcing the creation of a new program to house 100 people with serious mental illness who are caught up in our criminal justice system. This initiative will focus on men who need transitional housing and not jail. It will be modeled after the successful effort our city has implemented with the Women's Community Justice Project. The women in this program have a recidivism rate that is 5 times less than their peers. This type of programming works, which is why I am committing money to expanding it. The 100 beds that I'm proposing are a great start, but the reality is we could create 1,000 beds overnight, and they would be easily filled and immediately filled. That is how much work we still need to do as a city, and we will. I can promise you all that this is the beginning, not the end, of rethinking how we spend our taxpayer dollars. Here's another reason mentally ill people end up on Rikers when they shouldn't. We have options for incarcerated people who need inpatient drug treatment. The same cannot be said for inpatient mental health treatment. The few facilities that do exist don't have enough capacity for those in need, which means people end up stuck on Rikers while they're waiting for a bed. To fix this, I am calling for an investment in residential mental health programs. Let's take some of the money we spend locking people up with serious mental illness, and let's invest that money in inpatient programs so they can get better and learn to transition back into our society. So they can stay well and not recidivate, so they don't wind up interacting with the criminal justice system in the first place. Because the era of locking people up because they are mentally ill must come to an end. We have to think big on these issues, but there are smaller steps that we can take that will make a real difference. We can do more to provide judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys the right tools to handle these cases. When a judge agrees a person can safely live somewhere other than Rikers, we need to provide real options. So the City Council will fund a program to connect social workers with defense lawyers and medical staff early in the process when there is still time to find alternatives. We also need to address the continued incarceration of individuals whose conditions improve after being in custody. Right now, a judge typically determines whether someone goes to jail within 24 hours of their arrest. At that time, an individual may be experiencing the height of their mental health symptoms. Our city's jails have made real progress. I want to thank you, Commissioner Brand. Our city's jails have made real progress in the treatment of those with serious mental health issues. They get on the right medication and they stabilize. People get better, but they don't get out. So today I'm announcing new legislation called the Get Well and Get Out Act. This bill will require correctional health services to communicate critical information about a person's mental health status to their attorneys. This information will open doors to a more humane option for people living with mental illness. But as we increase our investment in alternatives to incarceration, we must make sure those investments are fairly distributed. A fair system means equal access to justice no matter where you live in the city of New York, no matter what your zip code is. One impediment to that is the size of our city. We have 5 district attorneys, a special narcotics prosecutor, hundreds of judges, and thousands of defense attorneys. Meanwhile, scattered throughout our different neighborhoods and precincts, there are dozens of unique programs designed to divert cases from jail or prison. The result is that the outcome of many criminal cases may hinge on which program was funded in a particular borough, or whether or not the people handling your case knew about that program. So the City Council will expand one of our most promising programs, Project Reset, and we will do it citywide. Project Reset moves misdemeanor cases outside the criminal justice system entirely. Right now, our system mechanically churns through misdemeanor cases, treating those charged with crimes as bodies and not as people. Project Reset recognizes their humanity. This program isn't just the right thing to do, it actually produces extraordinarily impressive results. After the completion of just 2 Project Reset sessions, Project Reset participants were less than half as likely to be arrested as their peers. Just 2 sessions. And I want to thank District Attorney Darcel Clark, who is here with us today, who has been a great partner in working with us to fund this throughout the Bronx. Thank you, Darcel, for your amazing, amazing work on this. I can't wait to see the results when we expand this program citywide. I'm also proud to be announcing that the City Council will fund the operations of a court in Brooklyn dedicated solely to assessing certain felony cases for alternatives to incarceration. This new courtroom will be created with the help of Chief Judge Jonathan Demick of Brooklyn Supreme Court and the Center for Court Innovation, and they're here with us today, so I want to thank them. It will, yes, thank you. It will analyze every eligible case in the borough to ensure that individuals have the opportunity to access alternatives to incarceration where appropriate. The court will begin in Brooklyn, and when successful, we can expand it citywide. Because the default outcome for most cases should not be incarceration. District Attorney Eric Gonzalez, who has been incredible, has already committed to this progressive concept. He is here today, and I want to thank him for his support and all the work that he has done in reforming our criminal justice system. Thank you, Eric. Fairness means more than getting an equal shot at helpful programs. Fairness also means economic equity. Here's a perfect example of economic inequity. In 1982, our state added mandatory court surcharges to all convictions as part of a misguided effort to be, quote, tough on crime. These surcharges run from $120 for a non-criminal offense to $250 for a misdemeanor and almost $400 for a felony. For those with means, $120 is a nuisance. But for those living in poverty, it is a severe hardship. So I am calling on the state to end mandatory surcharges. The poor are already overly burdened enough by our criminal justice system. Forcing them into a system that has discriminated against them for decades and then charging them for it is a deeper and further injustice. We also need to address how the city sets fines on civil offenses. Much like court fees, these fines have a disproportionate impact on the poor. So we will pass legislation supporting day fines. This pilot will establish a new fine structure for certain civil offenses, one that is tied to a person's means. The day fine concept is simple. Fines are based on a percentage of a person's daily income. It will not overpunish the poor, and it will not underpunish the rich. It will be fair. The day fine system is widely used in Europe, and it even has been used in New York City in a successful pilot on Staten Island in the 1990s. And it worked. The time is ripe to bring this progressive idea back to our city. Now, economic fairness isn't just limited to fines and to fees. It's also at the core of one of the most commonly charged crimes in our system. Here's a fact that may surprise many of you. It surprised me. The 4th most charged crime in our city is driving with a suspended license. Over 15,000 people every year are fingerprinted, booked, and charged with this quote-unquote crime. The crime in most of these cases is the failure to pay a moving violation. Hasn't everyone forgotten to pay a bill once or twice? For some people, a fine represents a difficult economic burden. Should people be arrested for this? Of course not. People can lose their jobs or end up being deported by ICE. How is this fair? Even worse, enforcement is often targeted at people of color. 76% of drivers in New York City are white. 87% of people arrested for driving with a suspended license are non-white. This is outrageous. This practice must come to an end. Now let's be clear. Everyone should pay their fines for a moving violation. But the punishment for not paying, should that really be criminal charges or jail? Some of these cases should be sent to DMV court where they belong. Not every case. Just those with one or two unpaid tickets. It wouldn't apply to those with multiple moving violations. It wouldn't apply to people charged with reckless driving. It wouldn't apply to anyone involved in a crash. Those individuals should be off the road. I am fully committed to eradicating the culture of dangerous driving that continues to permeate this city. What I'm proposing has nothing to do with bad driving. It has to do with bad policy that criminalizes poverty. Where reckless driving is occurring, we need and must oppose real accountability. Too often I read about serious cases of dangerous driving where the result is little to no consequences. We have already called for the expansion of the NYPD's collision investigation squad and evidence collection teams. But we need to do more. And that is why the City Council will work with advocates like Transportation Alternatives and Families for Safe Streets, who are heroes, who I see here today, who I love. And we're going to create a working group on justice and accountability for dangerous driving to make sure that this is handled correctly and properly and fairly. And I want to thank the representatives from these organizations and for their incredible, heroic advocacy that they do every single day. And I want to thank TA and Families for Safe Streets for being here today. Good to see you, Amy, as always. This is the kind of justice reform that we need. Let's end needless prosecutions for minor cases of driving with a suspended license and shift those resources towards more serious cases of reckless driving. We also need to take a closer look at another difficult issue that results in needless prosecution: the criminalization of people involved in the sex trade. I think we can all agree what you choose to wear should never be an indicator of criminality. Yet that's exactly what the state does with its archaic and wrong-headed law that penalizes what is allegedly loitering for the purposes of prostitution. This means that police monitor the way people dress under the guise that certain clothes make you look like you're selling sex. Arrests for this offense disproportionately target transgender women and women of color. The number of these arrests have more than doubled between 2017 and 2018. This is blatant misogyny. This law must be repealed immediately. But there is much more we should do to address this issue. Many people caught up in the criminal justice system are poor women of color who are engaged in survival sex. A significant number identify as survivors of sex trafficking and have suffered severe trauma. They should not be arrested, and they should not be prosecuted for selling sex. This doesn't mean that I support legalizing the sex trade, but persons involved in the sex trade should be given the services they say they need. And I will fund the creation of a comprehensive wraparound support center for those who are engaging in survival sex or who have been trafficked. This center will provide daily necessities such as meals and showers and medical care and legal assistance and mental health services and job training. And I will also support community-based organizations to hire and train outreach workers. The workers will help those engaged in the sex trade access counseling and medical services and housing assistance. We must provide services and assistance to persons engaged in the sex trade and end the needless criminalization and prosecution of these people. Because no matter what you are charged with, it is now a well-established fact that a summons, arrest, or criminal conviction has consequences that could follow a person for life. The City Council has already addressed this issue in numerous ways, including passing our Ban the Box legislation to reduce the impact of a criminal conviction on employment. But we still need to take a hard look at our own policies that affect those with criminal convictions, particularly those with drug convictions. Some of these policies certainly make sense. Nobody wants the city to hire a bus driver who has DUI convictions. However, some policies may be overly punitive. NYCHA, for example, can evict someone or deny them housing if they even have a misdemeanor drug conviction. NYCHA has every right to ensure that drugs are not sold in public housing. But what is a person recovering from substance use supposed to do? We must make absolutely sure that our policies do not stop people from getting the services or the housing that they need. Now, I support the full legalization of marijuana, and I've been advocating for the state to end this criminalization once and for all. The reality is that the use of marijuana is already legal in this city, if you're white. Over 90% of those arrested for marijuana are Black or Latinx. It is time to legalize marijuana for everyone. But the City Council is not sitting around waiting for the state to act. Last month, we passed legislation banning pre-employment drug testing for marijuana, ending a significant barrier to employment. We will continue this work by requiring an audit of all city agencies to examine their practices. The audit will identify points where drug convictions result in the denial of services or any other negative consequences. We will examine which of these policies make sense and which prevent people from moving on with their lives. Recovering from addiction is hard enough as it is. We need to do everything we can to make sure we are not making it even harder. I'd like to end on a personal note. I've always been very open about my prior struggles with addiction. When I was abusing alcohol and cocaine, my life very easily could have taken a different turn. 2 weeks ago, I saw 2 men of color sent to jail for having the same amount of drugs on them that I used to have on me on a regular basis. But I was never caught with drugs. Nobody ever looked. If they had, I honestly don't know where I would be today. I might not have a job. I might not be sober. But that's not how it works for someone who looks like me. I don't have a criminal record. I was allowed to learn from my mistakes. I was allowed the opportunity to get sober. I was allowed to grow into the man that I am today. And I feel very lucky to be standing here after all the mistakes that I made. But my story is not about luck. It's about privilege. I wasn't treated as a criminal because I was an addict. I wasn't targeted by law enforcement. I wasn't subjected to brutal violence on Rikers Island. Many, many Black and Latinx New Yorkers do not have that privilege. And I want a criminal justice system governed by compassion and by common sense. We know that this approach works because we have started it. You, so many of the people in this room, you all started it. Crime has continued to fall. Now let's go further. We can change the system. All of us here, the formerly incarcerated, the faith leaders, the defenders, the prosecutors, the judges, the grassroots advocates, the police, the service providers, the moms and dads, the young people, all of us. Together, we can create a justice system that is worthy of the greatest city in the world. Thank you all very, very much.